It is such a privilege and an honor to be on this platform after the many conversations that we've had before, and I think the timing is perfect for doing this because I know that as I speak, a lot of us have been through all kinds of things in the last year and a half or so, since the breaking out of COVID early last year. We've gone through some unprecedented experiences, and for it has less that experience has left a lot of us, mentally and emotionally not well. So it's a perfect time for us to talk about this subject that I'm very passionate about. It's a subject that I talk about. What got me passionate about the arena of the mind and emotions was an experience that I went through in the year 2010. I was here in South Africa. This is where I met Pastor Eric. So just to jog Pastor Eric's memory, we met in 2010 at Rainbow FM, which is a radio station here in Joburg, which is based in Westland. So what he may not have known are the details of what I was going through at the time, because at that time in 2010, I went through a divorce. And as I was going through that divorce, I found myself in a very weird mental and emotional space, which I didn't anticipate. As you can imagine, going through something as traumatic as the ending of a marriage. I became very bitter and angry um, because of what was happening at the time. And for the first time in my whole entire adult life, I found myself dysfunctional. Dysfunctional in the sense that um, I had a job to go to, but I was showing up at work, but I was not myself. I was not able to be productive because of what I was going through emotionally. On a typical day, I would experience, anger, bitterness, um, rage, shame, guilt, um, you name it, anxiety, depression. I just did not have the words to describe these things because it was something that was not aware to, that I was not aware of. So I knew I was not okay emotionally. I was working at a radio station at the time, so a typical day would be me waking up in the morning. I would struggle to wake up first and foremost. In fact, before even waking up, I was having trouble sleeping. I would sleep for maybe an hour or two because I would be up the whole night. And in my head, I'm replaying all kinds of scenarios, of how things could have gone, how things should have gone. Um, just the breaking down of a marriage, I was stressed out and I was slowly sinking into what I now know as depression. Um, the depression happened progressively and it was happening very fast. I struggled to sleep. So I would wake up, I would sleep for maybe an hour or two, and then I would struggle to get out of bed to take a bath in the morning because taking a bath by itself became such a big deal because I did not have the zeal to do that because of what I was going through mentally and emotionally. Um, I was this walking zombie. I could not function. So what I started doing was I started shutting myself off from the rest of the world. I would not pick up my calls. I would not return my texts. I basically just became a very lonely, miserable person. And in that time, early 2011, I attempted suicide twice. Now, that experience, it changed the way I do life, because I realized that I was in serious trouble. And Pastor Eric does not know this, but at that time, during those times, it's conversations with him that actually kept me going. Because at the time, I remember he was about to start a Bible college in Midrand. At Midrand, it was a MG. I'm trying to remember the name, but there was a Bible school he actually got me to enroll into that Bible school. And it's unfortunate I didn't finish, because I then had to go back to Zimbabwe in 2012. So that was the experience that made me wake up to the realities of having mental and emotional issues. So that was the experience that also led me to doing what I am doing now, because at the time when I was going through what I was going through, there were no places that I could go to and speak to someone about what I was going through, because as a man, society expects you to just keep it together and continue as if everything is normal, even when you are dying inside. So there were no places I could go to. My savior became a book that a friend of mine gave me. It wasn't even a book about mental health, but it was a book that it's a success book that I was reading at the time. And it gave me hope to start living again, to start looking forward to better things and all of that. So for between 2011 and 2015, I went through what I think was my healing phase. And after that, I just had this deep desire to first of all share my story with people, and second of all, to create a space where people can go to if they are going through mental and emotional issues. All of us are none of us are immune to life. We have lost loved ones. We've gone through divorce. We are in abusive relationships. We are still dealing with sexual abuse. We are still dealing with abandonment and rejection issues. We are still dealing with fathers that were not present. A lot of us are dealing with rivalry, just bad relationships with our brothers and sisters. And the point that I'm trying to make is that none of us are immune to the realities of life. And what life will do as it happens, depending on how you process it, it will leave you bitter, or it will leave you a much better person. It will leave you bitter, or it will leave you a much better person. So in 2015, I started to visualize the organization which I now lead, called the Global Institute of Emotional Health and Wellness, because I wanted to create a safe space, which is non-judgmental, that people can come to and talk about their issues and the things that affect their minds and their emotions. So I was just trying to give you a bit of background on why I'm doing what I'm doing, why this is so passionate to me. A lot of us, from growing up, we were not taught how to deal with mental and emotional health issues. It's so weird that when we raise our kids as parents, we teach them to be hygienic. We teach them to brush their teeth, how to look after themselves physically. There's so much information out there concerning how to look after ourselves physically. There's all kinds of information to do with how to diet, how to live healthy, how to exercise, how to look after our teeth, how to look after our eyes, how to look after our skin. Basically, we've been taught so well on how to take care of the physical, but we have been taught nothing when it comes to dealing with the mental. Now, it's crazy to me that we would look after our teeth better than we look after our minds. What do I mean by that? I mean, every single day, each and every one of us will brush their teeth, guaranteed. Each and every one of us, every single morning, will get up and take a bath, sometimes even more than once. But no one, very few people, know how to look after their minds. And yet our minds are the one thing that affect every single little thing that we do. I love Proverbs 4:23 because it talks about guarding the mind with all diligence, because all streams of life flow from it. Proverbs 4:23, you can look it up and look at that scripture. What that scripture says to me is that above all else, we must guard how we think and what we think about, because what we think about will ultimately affect all our our lives in general. So let me just give you some practical examples of how our mental health affects our day-to-day life. Your physical health is affected by how well your mind is. Let me explain. According to statistics, in this day and age, these are recent statistics, 87 to 95% of all visits to a doctor in this day are stress-related illnesses, which then manifest themselves into the physical. 87 to 95% of all visits to a doctor in this day and age are all stress-related conditions. So whether it manifests itself as BP, high blood pressure, or whether it manifests itself as cardiovascular conditions or one skin disease or the other, we can spend a whole hour with me explaining to you how certain physical conditions are triggered by how we think and how we feel on a day-to-day. So that's just on the physical side. Our mental health affects our physical life in a big way. A lot of the conditions that we are dealing with right now, that we are busy managing, are conditions that were triggered by continuous stress, which then manifests itself in physical conditions. Because when you stress a lot, you release stress chemicals into your body. And when you continuously release stress chemicals into your body, it gets to a point where your immune system is weakened. And when your immune system is weakened, you literally open the floodgates for sickness and disease. So that's on the physical side. Your relationships are affected by your mental health. If we want to know how well you are doing mentally and emotionally, if we want to know how you are today, we just look at your relationships. We'll first look at the relationship you have with yourself, and then the relationship you have with your wife or husband, if you have one, and we'll look at the relationship you have with your kids. All of those things can be broken down to how mentally well you are. You and I know that the quality of any relationship depends on the mental health of the people that are involved. If you are not mentally and emotionally well, let's give an example. Let's say you're somebody that was abused when you were young and you have all these wounds in your mind. In fact, let me use a physical example. Imagine somebody who breaks their leg, right? They break a leg and their leg is swollen. And because their leg is swollen, instead of going to the doctor, they don't. What they do is they limp and they pretend the leg was not broken. Now, what happens next? The leg will continue to swell. When the leg continues to swell, the leg becomes very sensitive, and because it's painful. Now, what are supposed to be normal interactions with human beings, which are relationships, become very painful things because you have become sensitive, the leg is swollen, it has not been looked at. So when you brush up against somebody who has a leg that is swollen, they will feel the pain and they will think that you're out to hurt them. But the bottom line is, it's not you, but it's them that have not gone to the doctor or the clinic to get their leg looked at. And I'll tell you why a lot of people don't deal with a lot of their emotional issues. It's because it's painful to face the pain of abuse. It's painful to face the pain of rejection. It's painful to face the pain of, being abandoned by a partner. It's painful to face the fact that, you were sexually abused when you were young. To go back and relive those painful memories is a difficult thing. That's why a lot of people don't do it. But guess what? As long as, in fact, let me use this example. When your leg is swollen and you have left it swollen for a long time, and it's swollen and it keeps getting swollen and swollen and swollen. When you do decide to go to the doctor, and then the doctor says, I'm going to have to cut this leg open to let the pus out. And when the pus is out, I can then start, treating the wound, and then the leg will get better. Do you think that's a pleasant experience? No. And a lot of people are afraid to face that pain, the pain of dealing with traumas that have happened to them in the past. But when the doctor then opens up the wound, of course, it's going to be excruciating pain. But guess what? As soon as the pus is out, healing begins, because God, in His grace and His mercy, does will for us to be mentally, emotionally, physically, and be spiritually well. The Bible is full of scriptures. The Bible is full of scriptures that prove that it is God's will for you to enjoy a good life in your mind and in your emotions. We enjoy the experience of life through our minds and our emotions. Our emotions are the things that we use to experience life. When you say, I've enjoyed myself, what are you talking about? You're talking about the emotion of joy, the emotion of peace, the emotion of all kinds of things. So it is the will of God for you to enjoy healthy relationships with people. And the only way to do that is to look within and say, what are the wounds that I've been carrying for a long time that I have not looked at? We'll get to that in the end of the session. I just wanted to show you how your mental health affects, first and foremost, your physical health, and it also affects your relationships. Your financial success, or just success in general as a human being, is affected by how mentally well you are. A person who has gone through a failure and they have been hurt by a failure and they give up is a person that is a victim of failure, making them mentally unwell to a point that they cannot see a possibility for a better future. If you've been through a series of failures in your life, maybe you've been trying to chase some goals and these goals were not happening. It's because now your mind is wounded, and when your mind is wounded, you can't see opportunity. You can't see your potential as a human being, because what failure will do, failure will distort your view of your own potential as a human being. And when that happens, you start believing lies. And those lies could be, I am not good enough. I don't have what it takes to be a successful business person. I don't have what it takes to make enough money to, support my family, or whatever it can be. But do you see how your success is directly linked to your mental and emotional health? So that's number 3. Number 4, your spiritual life is as good as how your mind is. If you've ever been depressed or meet somebody who has been depressed, they will tell you that in the moment of being depressed, it's very difficult to see or perceive the love of God. And when we talk about perception, we're dealing with the mind. So when your mind is injured, you cannot see how big your God is, how big He is, bigger than your problems. So it's very difficult for you to start believing that God can get you out of this situation, because your perception is injured and your perception has been impaired by your previous experiences. So do you see why your spiritual life is only as good as your mind is? So what I was doing here, I was presenting to you, before you, the case why you need to start paying attention to your mental and emotional health. When we go through different life experiences, rejection, for example, rejection will have you believing that you are the worst person on the planet, and it makes you scared to then enjoy relationships with people as God meant for you to do, because you now believe that because of one experience where somebody rejected you, you are now, rejection is your portion. And you move through life believing that if I attempt to connect with other human beings, I will be rejected. And because of your fear of rejection, you build a wall around you. So it becomes very difficult to meet that potential partner. It becomes very difficult to meet that one friend that God sent your way to get through that particular season. You can't see it because your judgment, your perception has been impaired. So what I want to do today, because it's the first session and we don't have much time, is I want to set a foundation for the sessions that are to come. We still have a couple of more sessions to do, but what I wanted to do was to, first of all, create a very strong awareness in you of how your mind and your emotions are affecting you exactly where you are today. Whether you are rich, whether you are doing okay, whether you are struggling financially, all of that can be boiled down to how well your mind is working. Because through our minds, we create. Through our minds, we glorify God. Through our minds, we can see opportunity. Through our minds, we can either drive ourselves into sickness. Through our minds, we can heal ourselves from sickness because of the way that we use them. 2 Corinthians 10:5, I think, says, take every thought captive and make it obedience to Christ. Make it obedient to Christ. Taking every thought captive. I'm paraphrasing. This is not exactly what it says, but the idea is take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So what I'm trying to do in this session, what I'm hoping to achieve in this session is to create enough awareness for you to start paying attention to that one thing that is affecting everything about you, which is your mind and your emotions. Because we think, we feel, and from our feelings, we act. And through our actions, our destiny is achieved, good or bad. Now, emotions are messages. Emotions are gifts. It's a mechanism that God created in His glory as a gift to us. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you feel something, when you feel angry, when you feel sad, when you feel ashamed, when you feel scared, when you feel rejected, when you feel whatever emotion that you feel, whether you feel happy or joy, those things, those feelings that you are experiencing are messages. Messages telling you what is going on in your mind. Emotions are gifts telling you what is going on in your head. Emotions contain information about what is going on in your thought life. So let me use a practical example. Your wife speaks to you in a certain tone, and you suddenly find yourself feeling all kinds of rage, like you want to beat her up. I'm using an extreme example here. Instead of reacting to that emotion and probably beating someone up, it's a moment, because God has given us that ability to pause and reflect. What people are, all people do for us is they trigger emotions, but they are not the problem. Let me repeat that again. People will trigger our emotions, but it is our responsibility what we do with those emotions. Now, I've talked about somebody triggering an emotion in you, and you find yourself feeling angry, or you find yourself feeling some kind of way. It's an opportunity for you to pay attention to your emotion and ask the question, what is this emotion telling me about what's going on in my mind? Because emotions will reveal wounds that you have buried deep down in you for so long. And somebody comes and they say something that triggers that trauma that you've been burying underneath for a long time. So instead of being angry at them and reacting at them, find it in you, find strength inside you Find strength inside you to pause and ask the question, why am I feeling this way? What is this emotion revealing about a wound that I am carrying? Because if you keep asking the right questions, you will get to the bottom of the issue and you will realize that the person is not the problem. This person is triggering a wound that I have inside me that I have not dealt with. Because from human beings, you only get one of two responses. I'll repeat this again. From human beings, you only get one of two responses from human beings, either a loving response or it's a cry for help. Either a loving response or it's a cry for help. There's nothing in between. So when you start to look at it in that way, you will realize that nothing is ever personal. And I'll tell you why I'm saying nothing is ever personal to you. If a person is not giving you love, if they are giving you anything other than love, it's a cry for help. And I'll tell you and present my case and prove to you why this is the case. We are born, we are all creations of the Almighty. And our Father in heaven is a loving God, and we are created in his image, and that image is love. So science has proved to us over and over and over again, I could share the studies if you ask them, that the default setting for the human brain is love. The default setting for the human brain is love, meaning that the brain functions at its most optimal, it's most effective when it perceives love. You will never come across a human being who says, I am so sick, I'm in hospital, my wife is giving me too much love, or my husband is giving me too much love. It does not happen because love is the default. So if you're not getting the default from any human being, please know it's not about you, it's a cry for help. Something has gone wrong with them somewhere that needs to be fixed, and it's not about you. Whether they beat you up or they said something nasty to you, because this is how God perceives human beings. Jesus Christ prayed a prayer when he was being nailed on the cross. And he prayed a prayer, and his prayer was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. I'm going to give you a moment to reflect on that. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Because Jesus understood that these people were initially and created as loving beings. But because they're not giving me love right now, clearly something is wrong, and it's not personal to me. So forgive them, for they don't even know themselves that something is wrong. They do not know what they do. So nothing is ever personal. Every time somebody had said something nasty to you, it wasn't about you. It was a cry for help. It is their wounds, their traumas, their experiences, their past crying out through their actions. So if they're saying something nasty, even when they think they are saying it to you to hurt you, they don't even know that they're crying out for help. But you and I know better. You and I know better. It's not about you. They are crying out for help, no matter how horrible what they did to you, no matter how nasty it was. It was really just a cry for help. Because if they were walking in the default, which is love, they would be loving towards you. Doesn't that just change your perception on how people have treated you? Because a lot of us are still holding on to a lot of anger and unforgiveness. And look, I understand. I've been there, and I know that is one of the hardest things is to forgive someone who has not apologized or even acknowledged that they did you wrong. But the Bible says, before you present your gifts before the throne, go and make peace with that person that you're still angry with. And I know that the beginning of good mental health is letting go and forgiving. Now, forgiveness may mean forgiving someone else, but for the most part, you and I know this. Forgiveness sometimes just means forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for your failures, forgiving yourself for the disappointments, for the bad choices, for choosing the wrong people, for making the wrong career choices, for whatever it was, for what you didn't do for your parents before they died, for what you wish you had said to them, for what you wish you had done. It's got to start with you. When you forgive, when you let go, you release yourself from the bitterness and the anger, because it is the bitterness and the anger that is affecting you in a very physical, tangible way. If for anything, if for nothing else, you have a medical need to forgive. You have a medical need to forgive. Type this up, put it on a fridge, and repeat it to yourself. I have a medical need to forgive, because the person that's dying the most, the person who's taking the poison is you. Because in your every single day, you are replaying the scenario, and you ruminate and you rewind it and you play the tape 1,000 times. You have not let it go. You haven't forgiven yourself. You haven't forgiven that abusive partner that let you down, who lied and cheated, and you didn't know it was a cry for help. You took it personally. But right now is the time to press the reset button and say, I'm letting it go. And when I'm saying I'm letting it go, listen, I am not oblivious to the challenge of forgiving someone, because your emotion will be telling you something else for the longest time. And look, the emotions will take time to align, but make the decision and say, I am forgiving myself for the bad decisions, for the things that I haven't done. Probably you're beating yourself up for what you should have done by this age. I should have had a house. I should have had a business. I should have this amount of money by now, but I haven't. You need to forgive yourself for all of those things and say, I am here now and I will start where I am. So let's start with forgiveness. We'll take a couple of seconds, maybe a minute of silence to remember the people that we are struggling to release, because that's where your mental health, the handbrake for your mental health is probably stuck. Just by forgiving that one person, and you'll see how everything, you will see, just by forgiving that one person, you will see how that will start to affect your mental health. And all of a sudden, you start to feel brighter. And that peace that you've been searching for a long time, it will start to come. You'll start to get a lot more sleep. You'll start to eat better. You will start to open yourself up to new opportunities and connecting with new human beings and potential partners and all of that, because you have released it and gone and let go. So just take a moment. You know the names, you know the people that you're struggling to forgive. And maybe that person is you. You're struggling to forgive yourself. And it's time you speak to yourself as your Father in heaven would speak to you. My child, I love you. I don't want you to hold on to this poison. So just let it go. Make space for what I have for you. But I can't put it in you when you have all these things that you're holding on to. 1 minute. Just remember this. Write their names down if you must, but you have to forgive them. I'm not saying it's not an option. You have to. Because if you don't, this could be the handbrake on your mental health right now. I know that for sure. And when you do that, we can talk about everything else. Talk about what you can do daily to improve your mind and your emotions. And the Bible, oh, the scriptures are so beautiful, man. There's so many scriptures that I'm dying to share with you that just talk about being in tune with the Spirit, focusing on the right things. I love Philippians 4:8. It says, whatever is pure, whatever is good, whatever is lovely, fix your minds on these. That's a vitality for the mind. But we'll talk a lot more about that. I think I'm gonna wind it up. And then open it up to you guys. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, I'll be more than happy to respond. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks so much, Johnny. That was really powerful.
Thank you.
Just switching on my video. That was
Thank
really
you.
powerful. Just what you're saying, forgiveness is the beginning of mental wellness. That's really, wow, that's something, we don't always think of it. We think, oh, we must do step ABC, we must do all these things to help us get better. But we need to first look inside and say, who is there that I need to forgive? That's really powerful. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Are there any questions from anybody? Questions or comments? Nothing? I think everybody's just like, wow, I need to do some introspection.
I know it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to take in. Yeah.
Good evening, Pastor.
Hi, I'm Sistani.
Yes, I just want to find out. Thank you, Tony. It's Tony Friday, your surname, Friday. Oh.
Yeah, well, that's a dilemma that I actually have because it's a name that stuck with me that I couldn't shake off. So Tony is my name. My real surname is Makoni, but Tony it's a radio name that I have struggled to run away from because people still identify me by that name. It's been 20 years now, so you can imagine. But Makoni is my surname. But when I use that surname, people look at me funny, like, okay, so who is that?
No, so I thought it's me. I'm not reading it right. That's why I was checking because I didn't want to call you a name that is not yours.
No, it's okay.
I've been listening to you, and this session really has touched me. I just want to find out from you. Say you go through this pain that is caused, and you listen to the teaching, you listen to whatever is good, whatever is lovely, guard your heart and this and that, and then you go through it because you tell yourself, I'd rather go the Lord's way than to say to go to who that counselor and all that, right? And then healed at some stage, ne? You get healed, and why does this? What triggers it to come back? I mean, you forgive, like forgive 101%, but you still get something that will cause you to come back and put straight to zero when you trying, you said you are fine and you move on, you're right, what causes that, like to go back and in the mind now, because you tell yourself, you know what, I'm not going to bother myself, I'm fine, I'm moving on. I have to live with these people alongside with me, most especially if it's someone not from your house. From your house, we always say blood is thicker than water. It's easy to forgive a child, your husband, your sister, your brother, but there's this thing about people outside that you learn to try and forgive them because they've bruised you, not just a small scar, it's a big scar. And then you tell yourself you're fine. And along the way, something hits and then you go back. I'm not sure if I'm asking Kakuhle. I'm not.
Yeah, no, I think I get you. The only thing that I'm getting from what you're saying is that you have told yourself that you are forgiven, but maybe you really haven't forgiven. Maybe you say you have forgiven, but you're still holding on to, you're still holding something against these people, because saying you are forgiven and actually forgiving may not be the same thing. So it may be time to introspect and really ask if you have, because the thing is, to forgive is godly. It's a godly thing to forgive. God is the author of forgiveness because he forgave us all. And I know for sure that when he does his work, he does not leave any, yeah, sure, it takes a bit of time between the decision and the emotions aligning to the decision. But what I know for sure is that after a certain time, surely you should, when you remember something, but it doesn't hurt you, you can remember a fact. The fact is, I was abused. That's the fact. But when you remember it after you're forgiven and forgiveness has taken place, it will not evoke those strong emotions. So when you find yourself forgiving or you say you're forgiven and then it still triggers a strong emotional reaction in you, it can only mean that you did not release it. And it may be reason for you to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, so why am I still holding on to something against this person? I hope that helps.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Tony, I see a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Is forgiveness a decision?
Yes, it is. It's a decision that is let me use another example. To love, when you say you love someone, it's a decision you make, and that decision has little to do with an emotion, because when you decide, you have to follow it up with some kind of action. And I know that when you are in action enough times, your emotions start to align with your decision. But sometimes it takes time. There's no set time that you can say, oh, after 2 months after making the decision, I'm supposed to be feeling, better. Or unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes it takes time for I'll give you an example. When my father was very abusive. He was very abusive. I did not like my father at all. I feared my father because he was physically, emotionally, verbally abusive. When he died, I did not shed a tear. I did not cry. In fact, there was a part of me that was very relieved that he was gone. But as I then got born again, which was some 4 years later, I then realized that, I was still holding a lot of anger towards it. And I had to forgive him. So I then forgave him, but the actual feeling when I remember some of the things that he did to me, it took a couple of years to get to a point where I will still remember some of the things that he did, but they didn't evoke, a strong emotional reaction in me. And gradually, now when I think about it, I remember it as history. Like it's history. Oh, he used to do this, he used to do that. But I'm not mad about it anymore. So for me, that's confirmation that forgiveness, yes, forgiveness took place, but the emotions are only aligned. They only started to align a little bit later on. So yes, it's a decision. Everything starts with a decision. Life is about decisions. You know, when you make the decision to love your cheating husband, you know, it's a decision that you make. You say, I am going to love this man regardless of what has happened. So you make the decision and then you follow it up with action. And as you do it, the more you do it, and look, I'm not suggesting it's easy. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But people are not doing it precisely because it's not easy. Because you have to put yourself aside. And we do not like doing that. Because for the most part, we are full of self, right? We are full of self. We are all about, we are driven by what we feel for the most part. And I don't think that's how God intended us to do, because your emotions will lie, your emotions will exaggerate, your emotions will amplify certain things. And if you are a person that is always following how they feel, then you are in serious trouble, because your emotions will feel 10 different things about the same thing. So to rely on an emotion for forgiveness is not wise, but to rely on a decision and follow it through with action, that is wisdom.
Thank you, Tony. I see there's one last question. We can look at this one last question before we round up in the chat. It says, what if it's not a person? Sorry. What if it's not a person? What if it's a situation you're going through? I have a friend who was involved in an accident 10 years ago and is now wheelchair bound. Recently, she attempted suicide. I guess the question is there, in that case, it seems like there's not
so
an
what's the question?
person. Well, it seems like the question is, you know, in that case, there wasn't actually a person involved. So is it then also a case of forgiveness, because the person was in an accident and they've been in a wheelchair and they tried to commit suicide recently? So I guess the question is, there was no person really involved.
To forgive.
Okay.
Maybe, you know, because I know that because getting involved in an accident is quite a traumatic thing to do, and God knows what do they blame themselves for what happened? Do they hold themselves responsible for what happened? Because I know there may be a lot of regret, like, you know, if I had been more careful, if probably I wasn't drunk. We don't know what the circumstances were surrounding that, but I do know for sure that for something like that to happen, there's a lot of what ifs. What if I hadn't driven that day? What if I was more careful? What if I just waited for, what if this, what if this, what? And maybe the person that they need to forgive is themselves, because the guilt and the shame and the punishing themselves 1,000 times over in their heads is probably what's driving them into a depression, and depression sometimes will lead to suicide. And I would say to the person who typed that question, you know, they have a lot of power right now to intervene, because also part of what we do as an organization is we have a suicide prevention hotline. And I'm going to share some a manual with Rosani to maybe share with you guys, so that you can also learn what you can do to help some of your family members and the people around you, should they find themselves in situations where they attempted to commit suicide. And so I would say the person who sent that message, they have a lot of power right now, and that power is in how they love, because love heals. Love draws people back to life, because God loves life. So the thing that they can do right now is to intervene, be there, offer them support, get them to talk to someone, because it sounds serious. If they can get them to talk to someone, that could be the thing that you know, they need to stop them from, you know, going over the cliff. So the first thing is support, show love. Sometimes supporting doesn't mean you say it. Sometimes it means you just say, you don't have to say anything, just be there, physical presence, and say, hey, listen, my friend, I know it's hard, but I'm here, and I'm here to hold your hand through this. So there will be a brighter day. So I would say support. You need to support this person. You need to be there and get them to speak to someone before it's too late. The fact that you can even see that they are depressed and they could be suicidal means that there's a reason why you have seen all of this, and it's for you to do something about it. So don't leave it to somebody else to do it. Go there physically, talk to them, get them to talk to someone. If they don't want to talk to someone, then be that someone that they talk to. Get them to really express themselves, because that's where healing begins, when people start to talk about what it is that they are going through.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for that. Was there a hand raised a bit earlier? No? Okay, so this will definitely be the very last question, Tony.
No.
Someone asked, how do we deal with the pain of grief? So maybe you can just touch on that for us in closing, please.
Yeah, grief is one of those things that will always be a part of, our pains as human beings. I can almost guarantee you everyone in this platform has had to deal with grief at some point. And grief is a form of loss. Grief, heartbreak, divorce, they all affect us in pretty much similar ways, because it's a loss. And we go through a heartbreak when we lose someone that is close to us. And I'm going to hasten and say this, because I don't want to create a false expectation when it comes to grief, because grief is one of the most difficult things that you can, deal with. Somebody once said, no one ever gets over grief. They just learn to manage it better because of how profound it is. I mean, think about it. If you were to lose a child, your life can never, ever be the same, ever. You can learn to manage it better, but it's something that lives with you for the rest of your life. 2 years ago, I lost my young brother, the last born in our family, to sudden death in 2019. And he left a daughter. She's 8 years old now. And every time I see her, it still breaks my heart. So there's a form of grief that I go through. So I don't think that anyone ever gets through completely, gets over. It's one of those things that we learn to live with, but the first thing to do when you're going through something like grief is to, in fact, that's the first thing that we can do to support people that are going through grief, is to allow them to mourn. Because I feel like the African culture sometimes does not allow us to properly, deal with grief. I mean, here's an example. If you go to any typical African funeral, you find the men sitting in some corner there, warming up themselves around the fire, and the women are doing the crying, and men are taught not to cry. And because men do not cry at funerals, they are affected by grief in ways that you cannot even imagine. So the fear is that as a man, if I am seen crying, then I'm weak. I'm supposed to be the strong one. I actually witnessed an incident once where a whole pastor was telling a man not to cry for his mother because he has to be strong for everybody else. I mean, what nonsense, right? Like, because everybody needs to mourn. Everyone needs to mourn. We all have to. The reason why men and women have tears in our biology is precisely for that reason. Tears are a part of our healing mechanism to start healing. So we need to encourage. Sorry about that. We need to encourage, people to cry, and never ever tell someone to not cry when they've lost someone. Support them as they cry. But as Africans, sometimes we we will talk in Shona, we say, like stop crying, no, it's like telling someone not to throw up when they need to throw up. You're not allowing them to heal, and it's not fair.